Welcome, good evening. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakurutam pravaram muninam padanjalim pranchaliranatosmi stuve padanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashyasya kramad vivaranasya cha. In the coming sutras, you find Patanjali is preparing our mind logically to accept the reality of these special mental powers that come to a person who practices yoga. Now, these powers are not to be paraded, used in a wrong way, or to be considered to be something very high or very desirable. In fact, these descriptions, according to some commentators, are in the form of a warning to persons who may develop these special mental faculties with the view that he should not be a spiritual seeker, should not be stuck at that level. Because if one becomes too proud and if he starts making use of these powers, it will be harmful to them. You have many stories and examples in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. You find Sri Ramakrishna happened to meet some persons. They came to visit him in the Dakshineswar temple, and they began to parade, exhibit some special mental faculties. And Sri Ramakrishna actually took them away from them. A higher spiritual person can help a spiritual seeker by taking them away from him. All these are different things. But one thing that I want to mention again and again, these ideas cannot be rationally verified in the laboratory of modern science. But the point is, Patanjali is talking about the natural faculties of a person when he focuses all his energies in one area, which are inevitable for him. A scientist who devotes his whole lifetime to do experiments or investigation into science naturally develops an ability to see more into certain things than perhaps somebody who is not a scientist. This is true for anyone who devotes all his lifetime and energy and focuses all his mental powers in one direction. He reaches a level of excellence, perfection, which may appear to be strange and unattainable to others. But if you understand the logic behind, you can see that these are not really supernatural in the sense that they are not natural. They are natural powers that come to a person who focuses his energies and time and efforts in one direction. So in the course of time, we will find something very interesting. So next, I think we have to discuss, we already touched upon the 15th sutra, which is very important. Kramanyatvam parinamanyatvi hetuhu. We already discussed this. I mean, what it says is simple. It says, of course, this we will understand in the light of examples, for example. There's a commentary on Vyasa, in Vyasa's Bhashya, that will make it very simple, very clear. Ekasya dharminaha ekaiva parinama idi prasakte kramanyatvam parinamanyatve hetu bhavati idi. What it means is, so we use certain technical terms in the previous sutras. Dharmi is a technical term. It means something. Dharma is its natural properties. Well, let's say, and then Vyasa gives the example, Tad yatha churnavat pindamir ghadamir kanamir dikshat. Idi chakramaha. For example, take let's say clay powder. The clay powder, clay can be used to make a pot, maybe some other clay vessels in different forms and sizes. Those different forms and different utility values, different shapes, are only the result, this variety of this parinama means evolution or change. I mean, the clay changes into a clay pot. It changes into a cup made of clay. It changes perhaps into the shape of a plate made of clay. So all these differences are nothing but differences at the level of processing. I mean, the sequence change in the transformation. When you make use of the clay, for in one way it becomes a pot, in another way it becomes maybe a cup, or like that gold. If you use it in one way, in one sequence, one krama, the word you use is krama, kramanyatum, different forms, different sequences, different processes. Why this world is so different? Why this multiplicity? So what the sutra tells us is, all the changes in the phenomenal world are nothing but changes at the level of krama, at the level of sequence, at the level of the process. So that's why the best example is gold and various ornaments made of gold, clay and various vessels or utensils made out of clay. So like that, you find in this world varieties, differences. They are all, really speaking, different changes, different forms at the level of processing or sequence. Now, this should be understood in the light of the previous sutra. Of course, we already discussed this. The 13th sutra, some of you may remember the 13th sutra. It's all interrelated. Etena bhudendriyeshu dharma lakshanavastha parinama vyakhyada. You find this 13th sutra. The 13th sutra should be understood. What it means is, the changes that happen at the mental level as we practice yoga, different changes. For example, this morning we discussed Egagra, Vikshipta, Egagra, Niruddha state. And 3 types of samadhis we discussed. One is Samyama, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi together. It's called Samyama. Then Sampragnata Samadhi and Asampragnata Samadhi, the highest level of spiritual experience according to yoga, where you get completely immersed in the identification of the supreme truth. So these are changes. These are sometimes viewed as changes taking place at the mental, emotional level. Similarly, Patanjali says changes do take place in the phenomenal world. That's why he says, Edena bhudendriyeshu dharma lakshana avastha parinama. Dharma means an innate nature, the form. For example, gold become earring and so on. And lakshana, parinama, means differences with regard to time, the past, present, and future. Things, the phenomenal world undergo changes that we all know. Modern science tells us changes take place over the time, in the past, in the present, in the future. All these changes take place. It's called Lakshana Parinama. Avastha Parinama. Sometimes, something can be bright, dull, new, old, and so on. So 3 states of changes are described here. The 13th Sutra tells us that These changes take place not only at the mental level, but also at the level of phenomenal world. Now, the 15th Sutra tells us that during these changes, there can be um, differences. Things can change their form, the shape, the size. All these are changes with regard to sequence of processing. It's a modern chemistry. When you change the quantity of different things that you put together, or anything, any chemicals, depending upon the sequence, the method of mixing together, different entities come into existence. So all changes in the phenomenal world are nothing but changes at the level of karma, at the level of sequence. That is the idea behind. Now we'll come to the 16th sutra. 16th sutra that we have to discuss today. Parinamatreya samyamat Atita Anagata Jnanam. Here there is a direct discussion of one particular kind of siddhi, what you call vibhuti, supernatural powers. You may call them supernatural powers, but when you read it, it's very simple. What it says is these changes, I mean, dharma parinama, lakshana parinama, and avastha parinama, changes with regard to uh, form or innate nature, changes with regard to time, and changes with regard to avastha, the state. When you actually concentrate on the reality of these changes, then what happens? You will be able to understand the past and also the future. That is Atita Anagata Jnana. Atita means that which belongs to the past. Anagata means that belongs to the future. Now, this you can very easily understand. What does a doctor do when you go to a doctor and you have to give to him different documents indicating your previous health problems, and from that he can make a diagnosis. He can, through his analytical powers, he can get an idea of what would be your health condition in future. That's a secret diagnosis, or your present condition. That also he will be able to understand. Through what? Through concentrated study of the indications, the symptoms that you present before the doctors. When you give the documents, through the documents, he understands what were your problems in the past, the laboratory test reports, all that will help us, will help the doctor to get a clear idea of um, your health condition. That is nothing but parinamatra samyama. Samyama means concentration. When we use the word dharana, dhyana, samadhi, we should not just imagine somebody sitting under a tree with a long beard immersed in meditation. That's not what it means. When the human mind gets completely concentrated, immersed through concentration on something, that person will be able to go deeper into the reality of what he is concentrating upon. That is the mystery of the great painters. See, an average painter who works very hard but is not so very skillful, he may paint something, but he cannot become a Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. I can give you an example. You see, in India, if you go, there are some temples, especially in South India. In North India, many of these temples were destroyed during Islamic invasions. If you go to South India, there are temples. You find there are temples with 1,000 pillars. And these pillars are arranged in such a manner they each correspond to one note of music. Saptaswara means 7 notes. How they built these thousands of years back, we don't know. But it is clear that they were extraordinary architects, carpenters, great engineers in ancient times who could build these marvelous things without the use of modern technology, modern equipments. So what was the tool they were using? Apart from the primitive tools which are available, primitive compared to our times, they were using some higher mental powers. So they could build these wonderful things. So, you think of pyramids, how they could have built these pyramids, let us say 4,000 years back. How do we explain? So it's all because of samyama. So samyama means absolute complete concentration. Dharana means concentration. Dhyana means continuous concentration. Unbroken succession of concentration. And samadhi means immersed in that concentration. So it also explains some of the extraordinary classical works in the history of literature. Um, well, I often give the example of Dostoevsky because it is such a classic and uh, open example. The man was absolutely indisciplined. He was I don't want to use the word, but he was actually addicted to alcoholism and all possible vices. But when he wrote something, he did not know what was happening outside. He just wrote, which he perhaps himself did not read, it seems. You can find many such examples. Michelangelo, Da Vinci. So, any great masterpiece of art and literature can come into existence only with the help of samyama, we call it. So also great musicians, Beethoven, or any great musician, and we don't give these examples, or a scientist, for example. Newton was practically concentrating on something. Newton did not have a computer in front of him or the equipments, the tools, but he had to use his own power of concentration to come to the conclusion of the reality of gravitation. So what Patanjali tells us is, when you use this power of concentration on your own mind, without focusing on something, but focusing on the reality itself, that we will discuss in the coming sutras. For example, I can give an example of this. Of course, we are going to discuss that later. It is I can give one example of this kind of concentration. It comes in Vijnana Bhikshu's Yoga Bhashya Vartikam, where Vijnana Bhikshu is actually commenting on Vyasa's commentary, I think on 17th Sutra. So we are going to discuss 17th Sutra later, but to get an idea of this, I can just refer to that. The 17th Sutra is Shabdartha Pratyayanam Itaredar Adhyasad Sankaraha Tat Pravibhaga Samyama Sarva Bhuta Ruta Jnanam. This is the Sutra. We will discuss this elaborately, but to give an idea of how a yogi's mind works and how he is able to understand things that normal human beings may not be able to understand. I'm just I'm referring to one important section in Vijnana Bhikshu's famous commentary, that is Yoga Bhashya Vartikam, which is actually a commentary on Vyasa's commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. There Vijnana Bhikshu says, Samyamantarasya Siddhyantaram Aha. Siddhyantara means I'm going to discuss another power, another unique, extraordinary power that comes to a person who practices samyama. So we should remember, samyama means dharana, dhyana, samadhi, ekatra samyama. That's already we mentioned earlier. Dharana, dhyanam, samadhi. Dharana means concentration. Dhyana, which is the seventh of Ashtanga Yoga, continuous unbroken concentration. And Samadhi means immersed, being immersed in that without focusing on any object, the highest degree of concentration. Now, when you apply these three psychological disciplines together, then mind automatically develops certain skills or powers of intuition, seeing deeper into things, seeing farther into things. So the commentator writes something which I say, tribute to these great spiritual teachers and sages who revealed these great ideas to us. We must read their sacred words. So I'm reading. Shabdartha Pratyayanam Idaredra Sankha Idaredra Adhyasa Samskara Tat Prabhaga Samyamat Sarvabhutarudha Jnanam. What it means is, so is an example based on or to clarify the meaning of the 17th sutra. 17th. So I should tell you what is 17th sutra. 17th sutra tells us that Shabda Artha Pratyaya. Shabda means the sound, the speech. Artha means the object or the meaning. Pratyaya means the understanding that we get. When we use a word, the word has got it has got a sound. The sound is one thing, and then above the sound, that is a padam, vakyam. It could be a word, it could be a sentence. That is shabda. From that we get the meaning. Artha. Artha means the object. Pratyaya means what impression we get in our buddhi, in our intellect. That is knowledge. So the word, its meaning or what it indicates, and the knowledge. Now, these three often are mixed together. Suppose you use the word cow is used. The name, the word cow, and the object cow, and understanding that is a cow, these three get together. What Patanjali tells us that if you can independently concentrate on this, then the very phenomenon of the word can be detached from that particular single entity called cow. The word itself is used, or the letters, the sounds which constitute that word in different formations are used to call different names, and the same sound phenomenon is used by animals and birds to communicate among themselves. That is what really the commentator is trying to drive home. I mean, the word phenomenon, the sound phenomenon is universal. Its different applications, different examples. You use the word cow, it is immediately identified with an animal with a particular shape, and we understand what it is. But that sound phenomenon is part of the universal sound phenomenon. If a yogi can concentrate on this sound phenomenon independently, what Vijnana Bhikshu says is, yogi will be able to listen to the sound of birds and animals and will be able to understand what they are communicating. That's what he's saying. Shabdartha Pratyayanam Idaredra Dhyasa Samskara the Pravibhaga Samyama Sarvabhutarudha Jnanam Gaurityadi Shabdaha Gaurityadi Artha Gaurityadi Pratyaya. Example is given here. Cow is the word, cow is the meaning, and cow is the idea. Suppose you separate that sound phenomenon and not just, taking it beyond the particular entity called cow, and you concentrate on its universal dimension, then you find the same sound phenomenon he used when a dog is barking, birds are crying, birds are singing. All the sound phenomena become immediately understandable, intelligible to the yogi. You know, again, I want to tell you that this again is uh, is a great idea that you find in the Yoga Sutras. So we have, of course, many stories you can find in Buddha's Jataka tales full of different animals speaking. And you can, with Buddha's life itself, you find. Also, you find the lives of great spiritual teachers where they could directly communicate with birds, animals, and could, and they understood them, and the birds and animals understood these mystics, and the mystics also understood them. So that's the idea behind. Tesham Bhakshimanam Sankedarupadhyasat Samskaraka Viveka Agrahanam Bhavadi. What happens is when we superimpose in the form of convention, we superimpose the particular word cow on the animal cow, and then what the idea that is a cow, all these are put together, so they become compressed and condensed in one unit. But use the word, concentrate on the word as part of the universal sound phenomenon, then you find every animal, every sound phenomenon is constituted by the same entity. And the yogi learns to, when he masters that, he is able to understand how different animals and birds and different non-human beings communicate among themselves. That is what Vijnana Bhikshu writes in his commentary on Vyasa's commentary. Vastudasu tesham bhedakasti, adastesham vibhage bhede samyema sashakrude sadi sarvabhudanam rutani nyayanti. Ayam kagadi imamartham evam pati pradityanena sabdena kathedityevam ityartha. What Vijnana Bhikshu says is, because of the superimposition that we do when we use the word cow, immediately that word is superimposed in that animal, the form, and then immediately it conveys an idea. This is what happens. But a yogi can divide them, yogi can detach them from each other. Pravibhaga means independently. A yogi will be able to practice samyama uh, on each of them independently, taking one from each other. Then what happens? He will have the direct knowledge or sounds of all living beings, this crow or the other beings, birds, everything. I'm just giving an example. Now, well, just as a great medical practitioner or a great engineer is able to accomplish extraordinary things because of the concentrated study of his own chosen subject or area of specialization, or an artist, or a writer. Similarly, a yogi, when he employs the same skill of concentration, is called samyama in the technical language of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. He is able to communicate with different living entities. Is an example given. What it means is, when you develop our own mental powers, our mind develops certain skills which may normally be considered to be supernatural. But if you look at the logical evolution or development of these skills, it is no more supernatural than the artistic powers of Michelangelo or Da Vinci or anybody, or the artistic skills of the Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, or maybe the scientific genius of an Einstein or Newton at different areas. That's what is called samyama. So you can see here There is nothing occult or extraordinary or supernatural. If you look at the logic behind, it is natural. I mean, the ability to concentrate within our own mind, then mind develops many skills which remain hidden. As I mentioned in the another sutra, it's all like there is a sutra which comes in the Kaivalyapada, the fourth chapter, where Patanjali says, all these skills, all these abilities are just like removing obstacles that stand in the way of their development. You cut a canal, you remove the soil on that part of the earth, and the water flows from the river to the field. And you call it, I have cut a canal for 1 mile. The earth for 1 mile long, that particular shape is removed, and then water flows. You have a huge granite block, and if you are a sculptor, you chisel out all unnecessary parts, and what comes out is the statue of a Buddha. So also a Tolstoy. The great genius, I'm talking about those who in their creative writings could look at humanity and human civilization, this unique unfolding of human life and human civilization from a different perspective. And suddenly you find it is true. One great sign of a genius or a classical work is when you read it, you just get the feeling, yes, it is true. At a different level, I would say, I don't know how many of you will agree, if you look at the works of Toynbee, Arnold Toynbee, I mean, where he elevates history to the level of a philosophy. No, I'm giving examples from more or less intellectual field. The difference between yoga and these examples, which I referred to just now, is this. A yogi can use his powers, mental powers, at will. He is complete master. But many of the great intellectual geniuses, they display these powers only in one chosen area of their own specialization. But still, nevertheless, they are grand examples of samyama. So that's the idea behind. So then we come to the 16th sutra, Parinamatraya Samyamat Adita Anagata Jnanam. That is, when you do samyama on these 3 changes, that is, we already discussed here, Dharma Parinama, Lakshana Parinama, and Avastha Parinama. We discussed the 15th sutra. Then what happens? Such a person will be able to understand the past and future. As I mentioned, when you do samyama, you are concentrating on your own vrittis and vasanas and samskaras. When you concentrate on a person's behavior, the way he looks, the way he acts, the way he speaks, and you should, when you concentrate on that and think of that, then you'll be able to logically analyze what should be the reasons, the causes which made him to behave or to talk and act like that. And through that, if you concentrate enough, you'll be able to understand a clear idea of the reasons why such a person, under certain circumstances, behaved in such a manner. So concentration means going deeper into something. Samyama means going deeper. And this going deeper helps us to catch some higher dimensions, which are not easily visible on the surface. But if you do samyama, they become very, very obvious. That's why Vyasa says, dharana, dhyana, samadhitrayam, ekatra samyama uktaha. He actually here, Vyasa, in his commentary on the 16th Sutra, he's reminding us again and again, we should always remember, samyama means dharana, dhyana, Samadhi, these three, the sixth, seventh, and eighth stages of Ashtanga Yoga. When we concentrate on this, then what happens? All these intuitive powers and understanding, cognitions will take place. According to certain commentators, there is another explanation of this phenomenon that is also equally logical. I mentioned this earlier when we were discussing Sankhya philosophy. And yoga derives its metaphysical system directly from Sankhya system. Sankhya system is attributed to Kapila, with the ancient Kapila, Kapilacharya, I mean this great sage called Kapila, who is the original exponent of Sankhya system of philosophy. And this philosophy was further expounded in another book, which is now widely read, studied, and taught. That is Ishvara Krishna. That's the name of the author. His name is Sankhya Karika. That's the name of the text. So that is the text. Now, this in that Sankhya Karika, there is this description of the evolution of the universe, the cosmos, and is completely taken and accepted by yoga philosophy, the Patanjali. It is Purusha and Prakriti are two fundamental categories. Purusha is self-effulgent, Prakriti is not effulgent, but Prakriti is the origin of the entire evolution. From Prakriti, Mahat comes, it is cosmic intelligence. From Mahat, Ahankara comes, the ego system. Ahankara has got three dimensions, Sattviga, Rajasiga, and Tamasiga. And from these, the five senses of perception, the five senses of action, and what we call Pancha uh, Tanmatras and Pancha Mahabhutas, and of course, mind all evolve. This is the evolution. I don't want to deeper into this, it will be confusing at this stage. But what I want to remember you, the first evolute from Prakriti is Mahat, that is cosmic intelligence. Mahat Tattvam is cosmic intelligence. What a yogi does is, through samyama, he is trying to get back to his identity from where he came. I mean, he reaches his identification with this cosmic mind or cosmic intelligence. This is what is happening. When this happens, and this cosmic intelligence is the principle of omniscience, all-knowing omniscience. I mean, this repository of all wisdom. Cosmic intelligence, so Mahatattvam is the first evolute. From that, the whole universe emerges, including all animals, human mind, human senses, everything. So yogi, through samyama, he's actually taking his journey back to his original source. That is Mahatattvam. And he identifies himself with the cosmic intelligence. When he is able to do that, he becomes endowed with this extraordinary powers of cognition and intuition. This is the view of many of the commentators. Now it becomes very simple to understand. Just as you exercise your muscles, similarly, yogi exercises his mind. When you exercise your muscles, the physical level, you can do many things. So a man like, I think his name is Sergei Bukka, was Soviet Union's pole vault champion. It is said that he for years, several years, I don't know how many years, 17, 20 years, every year he used to break his own record. There was no other record for him to break pole vault. And his record still remains unbeaten. He's the greatest. I mean, pole vault as a sports item identifies himself with Sergei Bukka. He's a great pole vault champion. Maybe a Romanian, Lithuanian, somebody, but he was part of the Soviet Union's Olympic team for years and years. Now, how could he do that? his level of pole vaulting skill remains unattainable. Every year, his main job was to break his own record because he was no other record to break. Like that, now how could you do that? Purely skill and extraordinary skill, the physical. Like that, we can, the way he exercised his own physical body to reach that level of perfection in a physical sports, the yogi practices his skill at the mental level. And his mind also develops extraordinary powers. That is the explanation. So that's why the 17th Sutra is very, very famous, and it is considered to be one of the important sutras which explains the whole phenomenon. It means this power of understanding the language of different animals and birds. All these are explained here. That is, Shabdartha Pratyayanam Idaredra Adhyasat Sankaraha. That is one. That is what happens, Shabda, Artha, and Pratyaya. That is, Shabda means the word, Artha means its meaning or object, Pratyaya means understanding or experience, knowledge, or Buddhi, Vritti, Jnanam, knowledge, all these words are used, Pratyaya. So they actually get tied up together. I mean, they appear to be single in appearance, so to speak. Normally, in a cow, when you use the word cow, the word, the spelling, the word, and the animal's form that you know. So also, your understanding, knowledge that this is cow. You can see, you identify. So all these appear to be as a single unit, a single appearance. A yogi will be able to divide this. That is why Pravibhaga Samyama. He divides and then he practices Samyama on each of these separately. Then what happens? The whole phenomenon of sound, objects, knowledge, everything becomes known to him, the universal dimension. So that is the sutra, the 17th sutra. Now we come to 18th sutra. Samskara Sakshat Karanat Purvajadi Jnanam. How do we understand our own previous life cycles? That is, first of all, we should know that what is samskara? Samskara is the result of our own previous experiences. Something that we have seen, we have experienced. Any kind of experience will leave a residual impact, we call chit vritti, a tendency, and becomes a strong aptitude registered in our system. Now, if we can look back and do a kind of self-analysis, we can analyze our own character, our own thoughts, our own ideas, our own samskaras. Then we'll be able to understand the experiences which have given birth to these samskaras. Because without some previous experience, samskaras will not be formed. Samskara should be understood as a strong tendency. Of course, tendency is not an adequate translation, but that is the most commonly used English word. So samskara is a tendency. If we can actually analyze our own samskaras, our own tendencies, our own thought currents emerging in our mind with some yama, with full concentration, then we'll be able to go and move backward, we will be able to travel backward on time. So what could be the experience that has produced this particular samskara in me. And this introspection, this samyama will help us to get an idea of our own previous life cycles. So this is uh, what Patanjali tells in the 18th Sutra. Samskara Sashakaranath Purva Jadi. Jadi here means birth. I mean life of birth. That's meaning. So of course the commentator Vyasa says these samskaras are of two types. One, memory, likes and dislikes in the form of extreme infatuation or its opposite. That is one kind of samskara. The other kind of samskaras, our own experiences, our good actions and bad actions, which may be good or bad. So, in other words, there are two types of samskaras. One is nature, which is the nature of memory, which gives birth to klesha. Klesha we already studied in the Yoga Sutra earlier. Avidya, smita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, klesha. Egoism, extreme liking for certain things, extreme dislike for certain things, extreme aversion, extreme infatuation, irrational hostility, or irrational infatuation. All these mental waverings, all these are related to memories, are closely linked to memories. And memories are linked to previous experiences. So this is one kind of samskara. The another kind of samskara is our own previous life, our own actions, dharma, good actions, bad actions, auspicious and inauspicious actions. All these samskaras. So once we concentrate and do samyama on these samskaras, we can see the symptoms of the indications of these samskaras in our thought currents, in the way we talk, in the way we react to life and different situations. Which are all our entire mental constitution is formed by these samskaras. So if a person can do some yama on these samskaras, it is possible for him to get those mental abilities, that intuitive power, and with that he will be able to get an idea of his own previous life cycles. Of course, the greatest example, there are many books in this on this subject. I'm not talking about Edgar Cayce or the case studies. I'm talking about Buddha's Jataka tales. In fact, a lot of dialogues in Buddha's life relate to this, refer to this, are indications of the previous life cycles. How do we, how do we define, how do we explain the way we act and behave? In the same family, 5 children born in identical family system, identical education, same kind of growing up, upbringing, but become totally different persons in everything, attitudes, tendencies, everything. How do we explain it? So there is something other than the physical body. The physical body is now being used by somebody who lived in his previous life cycle. Those samskaras, those tendencies have migrated to this new body. So our life doesn't begin with birth and our life doesn't end with death. Such a fundamental principle to be kept in mind when we try to understand Patanjali Yoga Sutras. We should remember that all this I appear to be a bit exotic, irrational, unscientific, and so on. But the great value, the great contribution of Patanjali is He never asks us to believe in anything blindly. He tries to scientifically, rationally explain what we can do if we do experiments in our own mind, in our own mental world, the way we do experiments in the external world. When we do experiments, when we practice different disciplines and concentration in the external world, we are able to discover many of the mysteries of nature. And similarly, when we do experiments in our own mental world, there is a huge reservoir of powers and abilities and faculties which remain hidden, which are waiting to unfold. That's what Patanjali Yoga Sutra tells us. Now we can have interaction. I think we have time. You are most welcome to ask questions. Most welcome.
Hari Om Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, one statement you made was how the powers which are exhibited by a yogi, for example, are not any more supernatural than the art that is exhibited by, say, someone like a Michelangelo. One thing that brings which makes people think that this is probably supernatural is typically someone like a Michelangelo or a Mozart is seen to exhibit these qualities through their life, while sometimes for certain yogis you observe this like a switch was turned on. For example, Swami Vivekananda, I'm sure there was a lot of effort that went into his transition into becoming the great monk that he did become. But people typically talk of this incident where Swami Ramakrishna gives him, transfers his power to Swami Vivekananda, for example. Or Ramana Maharishi, there is this story where he just went off into a mental zone all of a sudden, unexpectedly. Why do we see such stories in the lives of yogis? Because that is what kind of makes people think it is probably something supernatural, isn't? Don't you think so?
No, the point is, so when you talk about a scientist or a Michelangelo or in this pole vault champion, we can see at a physical level how they are developing these powers. We can see. But a yogi is experimenting, doing all these experiments, not at the physical level. So there is no way for us to verify. So frequently people may think that uh, this is something supernatural. But once we understand the principles that Patanjali lays before us, or the commentators of Yoga Sutras especially, they present before us. And you can see a continuous thread, a succession of cause effect link, and then it becomes intelligible. I don't mean to say that there are many people who are doing this, not at all. But I mean to say maybe the conditions for doing these higher samyama experiments exist only in isolated communities, maybe in some isolated places in India, not in formal community, the public place or anything. So people naturally they attribute some kind of secretiveness or something out of the way because they cannot verify this. That could be the only explanation I can see. But of course, we have pictures. I don't know if you have seen that the video is still available. Ramana Maharshi, even there was a cow, the cow practically. Now, you can even YouTube, you can see dogs and different animals behave wonderfully, almost like family members. That is true. But in the life of that cow, you find the way the cow passed away. It died, passing means died, Ramashi Sasana, Lakshmi, that's the name of the cow.
Yes.
So how do you explain that Ramashi's place is not far from your own place? I don't know if you're seeing, but you can see still the cow passed, died, in fact, in a different way. Of course, so that's why I said we cannot verify this the way we verify things in a laboratory. But this is the explanation that Patanjali and the commentators present before us. That's what I said. Yeah. I
Thank you,
mean,
Maharaj. Yeah.
you see when we develop the power of concentration, the power of concentration can be used to do better in the examinations, to finish your thesis much more easily. That kind of concentration at another level has got some other benefits. And this is the benefit, one of the benefits that Patanjali presents before us. That's it.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yeah, namaskar.
In the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, 5th volume, page 394, there is a question by somebody to Swami Vivekananda. He asks, "Who is my Guru?" And Swami Vivekananda says very succinctly, "Whoever can tell you your past and future is your Guru." This very simple question, very complex question, very straightforward answer. In the sutras 16, in the sutra 16, a yogi who can concentrate or samyama on three stages of evolution can tell the past and future. He gets the knowledge of past and future. I went to, in the last 16 years, I went to two Kumbh Melas and met about 2 dozens of yogis, famous yogis who have been advertised as having a lot of these powers. And went there and asked whether they can tell me about one incident in my past, and none of them could answer that question. And then since then I have been going to a lot of other famous people and asking this question. Nobody answered that. Is this only for the dead swamis that these powers are available, or are there really
Yeah,
anybody who can do this? Do you
yeah,
know anybody who
yeah. You know,
has?
if you go about looking for people who can tell something from your past, which you know very well, if you, of course, there are different explanations. If we, when we go for testing somebody, let us see whether this man can really tell me. Right? I think normally they won't respond. They will ignore you. The great yogis will tell you only if you go as a spiritual seeker and asking somebody, tell me, let me see if you can tell me this from my past. Normally they won't tell you anything because that's why that is an important thing. It can give it can cause many misunderstandings also. The main thing is in spiritual world, these things are not taken to be very important. Genuine spiritual seekers do not consider these skills are something very important. So they're not a big deal. In fact, in the Kaivalya itself, there are elsewhere the commentators' views. They say one should never, never, never make too much of these powers, and one should completely ignore. And surprisingly, you find um, if you look at the great epoch makers of the spiritual world, all of them have used one way or other some of these skills which you may call, which we all call supernatural powers. True. But they never paraded them. They never made an exhibition of them. This is a very important point. Remember, Buddha did. She, one lady came and her children had passed away and were crying and weeping. Buddha could have easily changed her mind the way he changed Angulimala's mind. Another context, another story. But Buddha just gave her some mustard seed and go about. No, he didn't give mustard seed, sorry. He told her, you please go and visit different houses in the village and get 1 seed of mustard seed from each of these village. Different versions of the story. And the lady came back. She could not go. She could not meet any house owner, any householder, but nobody had passed away. She became consoled. So you find even the greatest teachers may not use this kind of, all right, I've solved the problem. It is wrong and it is forbidden. And Sri Ramakrishna uses a very strong language to condemn this, which I won't. Sri Ramakrishna was a very simple person who spoke great truth in very simple language. So he didn't mince words. He actually compared this sacred, this supernatural powers to something totally repugnant and undesirable. It is totally undesirable. He used such a language to condemn those who go for this. So you find genuine spiritual teachers will never answer you, well, I will tell you what happened. He will not do that. An astrologer may tell you, and sometimes it could be accidentally correct, right or wrong, I do not know. But astrologers will tell you, saints will not tell you. There are astrologers who have again developed certain skills. Apart from studying astrology, they have developed certain powers of concentration through some meditation or praying to a deity, worshipping a deity. They have developed this power of concentration, and this concentration sometimes helps them to make predictions. I'm not a believer or a non-believer in astrology, but I mean to say, a saint will never come and tell you, well, I shall tell you. He will not do that. If he finds that you are a genuine seeker of spiritual truth, he will do that. That's an important thing. See, even Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda was such a spirited, but completely honest and sincere seeker who was not willing to believe. And Sri Ramakrishna actually changed him. But Swamiji was so outspoken, he was not arrogant, so very outspoken. So Sri Ramakrishna could see he was pure, simple, spiritual person who is actually looking for something higher. And Sri Ramakrishna taught him. But many people came to Sri Ramakrishna to test him. He didn't, he said, in fact, his own language is, oh, I feel like not speaking to this person. So remember, it doesn't work, really speaking. It doesn't work. Because in spiritual world, what you are given, you may not get unless you are ready for what you are given. This is an important difference. See, in normal life, somebody gives you a book, you get the book. Whether you deserve, whether you are going to read that book or whether you are not going to read that book, you get that book. But in spiritual life, things work according to different set of rules and regulations, laws, so to speak. So unless you are ready, nobody will give you. And unless you are ready, even if somebody gives you, it won't be yours. That's an important point, remember. Vivekananda himself had started meditating and praying right from his infancy. Remember. That's it. He was such a sincere seeker. And Sri Ramakrishna could see that. So this is an important point. In spiritual life, we won't get unless we are ready for it. And even if we get, if we are not ready for it, it will be of no use to us. This is an important point to keep in mind. So very often we try to judge and understand spiritual things using the laws of empirical world, and that's a gross mistake.
Then how do we avoid false gurus, Swamiji?
Well, I think you should attend, if you don't mind, may take classes like this, where Patanjali tells you there is nothing occurred. If somebody tells you this is something that I got from somebody appeared and I gave me this, I gave you, it's not available to anyone else, don't accept it. I can quote Vivekananda. What Swami Vivekananda says is, somebody tells you, I know this, but you will never be able to know this. It is only given to me. Don't accept it. If somebody tells you, well, I know this, You too can have it only when you are ready for it. Then you can accept it. So any kind of exclusivistic claims, extravagant claims itself is an indication that it is really non-genuine. This is an important point. Spiritual experience is universal. That's why Patanjali says anyone who is ready, see, one should go through the yamas and niyamas. That itself is a big deal, to speak. Think of all these 10 disciplines: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parikiraka, sauja, santosha, tapasvatya, 10 disciplines to practice in word, in thought, in deed. Truthfulness, purity, contentment, then non-possessiveness. All these, how can we practice in word, in thought and deed? It certainly takes a lot of effort, a lot of practice. Once we do this, once we practice this, then we'll be able to find out who is the right person or not. This is an important point.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hi, Swamiji. You talked about intense concentration and many great artists, writers cultivating that intense concentration to help them with their work. And I'm curious if you could share a bit more about how we can also cultivate that intense concentration in our day-to-day lives at work, for making decisions, whatever else we need to in our life. How can we also build that level of concentration?
Yeah, we can increase our concentration by focusing on the subject on which you want to concentrate with great intensity. This is the one thing. If mind is not willing to cooperate, then we should be able to develop a strong desire to do that work properly, to do the job properly. So the strong positive desire to do a work properly will sharpen the focus of mind. Normally our mind automatically gets concentrated on something in which we have a natural interest. Our natural interest will make it easier for us to concentrate on something which we are concentrating. Normally, we are not able to concentrate because we may not be fully interested. We may not be able to derive joy in doing that. That could be one reason for it. So to develop a sense of joy in doing what we are doing will help us to concentrate. It increases the power of concentration. Everyone is able to concentrate on something or other in which he or she is interested. So we can develop a positive interest on what we are supposed to do on our duty, obligation. Then it will help us to increase concentration.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
There are no more questions, Maharaj.
Yeah, no more questions. Thank you. Thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ram Krishna Pranamastu.
Ram Maharaj.